Cowboy found Apache writing in ashes, and the last line pulled him into her past. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Jack Matthews had spent most of his life in the vast, empty stretches of land that stretched out endlessly in front of him. A cowboy by trade, Jack had never been one to seek out company, content with the solitude his ranch offered. The harsh, rugged terrain was all he needed. He had no particular ties to any place or person. But one day, everything changed. It was a crisp, early morning when Jack was going through his usual chores around the property. The sky was still dark, and the ground was covered in a light mist. As he walked past the fire pit that had long since burned down, his eye caught a glimmer of something unusual in the ashes. At first, he thought it was just another odd rock, or perhaps a piece of burned wood. But as he got closer, he realized it was something far more significant. There, amidst the charred remains, was a small scrap of paper. His heart raced as he knelt down and picked it up, brushing away the soot and dirt. The paper was old, torn, and covered in blackened edges. But there, in the center of the ash, were symbols he couldn't quite understand, symbols that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Jack's curiosity took hold, and he began to study the markings. The symbols weren't in English, and they didn't resemble any known alphabet he had seen before. They seemed to be from a language older, more mysterious, Apache, he realized. He had seen similar markings before, though he had never fully understood their meaning. But this was different. This felt personal. As he examined the paper further, a single line stood out to him, something that didn't belong. You have seen what was meant to be forgotten. The words were simple, but they hit Jack like a wave, crashing into the shore. He didn't know why, but those words felt like they were meant for him, meant to draw him into a past that had been buried, a past that was no longer his to ignore. Jack stood up, the wind blowing softly through the trees, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. He turned the paper over, looking for more clues, but there was nothing else. The words lingered in his mind, and something deep inside him told him this was just the beginning. He didn't know it yet, but Jack Matthews was about to find himself caught in a web of secrets and mysteries, and the Apache woman whose past was tied to these symbols would soon pull him into her world, whether he was ready or not. The morning sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when Jack Matthews found himself pacing back and forth in his small cabin. The strange paper he had found the day before weighed heavily in his hands. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was trying to tell him something important that he had to uncover. He stared at the symbols again, running his fingers over the edges of the burned paper. The single line of text still haunted him. You have seen what was meant to be forgotten. He couldn't help but wonder why he had found it, why it had been left for him to discover. Jack wasn't one to believe in fate, but something about the situation made him question his skepticism. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't asked for this mystery to invade his quiet life. But here it was, demanding his attention. The air outside was crisp, the kind of cold that made the bones ache. Jack stepped out of his cabin, the paper still tightly gripped in his hand, and walked toward the small creek that ran through his property. The sound of the water rushing over rocks filled the air, and for a moment, Jack allowed himself to relax. Maybe if he got some fresh air, his mind would clear. But as he walked, his eyes kept drifting back to the paper in his hand. The words still echoed in his head. He needed answers. He wasn't sure where to start, but something told him he had to go to town. There, he might find someone who could help him understand what he had found. The town wasn't far, just a few miles away, but it was a place Jack rarely visited. It wasn't that he didn't like people, it was just that he preferred the solitude of his ranch. People had a way of complicating things, and Jack liked things simple. But today, things felt different. The paper felt like a riddle he couldn't ignore. The town was quiet when Jack arrived, the streets empty except for a few men loading supplies onto wagons. The saloon was the first place he thought to visit. It was always the place where people gathered, and maybe there, he could find someone who knew something about the Apache language or the symbols he had found. Inside, the saloon was dimly lit, with a faint smell of tobacco and old wood filling the air. Jack walked up to the bar and ordered a drink, scanning the room for anyone who might be able to help. That's when he saw her. A woman sitting alone at a table in the corner, her dark hair cascading down her back in waves. Her features were sharp, but there was a softness to her eyes, a look that made Jack pause for a moment. Something about her felt familiar, but he couldn't place it. She caught his gaze and smiled faintly, but there was something more in her eyes, a recognition, as though she had been expecting him. Jack hesitated, then walked over to her table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low. "I'm looking for someone who might know about Apache symbols. I found something, and I need help understanding it." The woman didn't say anything at first. She simply studied him, her eyes searching his face. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "What you found is not meant for you," she said. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Her words were cryptic, but he knew deep down that they were important. She continued, "You don't understand the weight of what you've discovered. But I can help you." Jack sat down across from her, feeling a sense of urgency rise within him. "Who are you?" he asked. She looked at him with a knowing smile. "I'm someone who's been waiting for you to find that paper. My name is Maria Redfeather." At the mention of her name, Jack felt a sudden jolt of recognition, though he couldn't explain why. He stared at her, trying to process what was happening. The air between them seemed to crackle with an unspoken connection, one that went beyond words. Maria's gaze never wavered as she spoke again. "You've seen something that's tied to my past, and now you're part of it. Whether you like it or not." Jack felt his heart race. He had no idea what was going on, but he knew that this moment was the start of something that would change his life forever. Jack sat silently, trying to absorb Maria's words. Her name echoed in his mind, like a forgotten memory suddenly brought to the surface. Maria Redfeather. He didn't know why, but something about her felt deeply familiar. As if their paths had crossed long before this moment, long before the paper, the symbols, and the strange feelings that now clung to him like a shadow. She looked at him with a calm that unnerved him, her eyes steady and unwavering. There was no judgment in them, only an understanding, as though she knew exactly what he was thinking. "You came here for answers, didn't you?" Maria's voice broke the silence. Her words were soft, but they carried a weight that made Jack's heart skip a beat. He nodded slowly, unable to speak. "I know what you found," Maria continued. "And I know why it's pulling you in. You're not the first to be drawn into this. But I'm afraid you might be the last." Jack raised an eyebrow, confusion settling in. "The last? What do you mean?" She leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. "You're looking at something more than just symbols. You're looking at the key to something that has been buried for generations. Something dangerous." Jack shook his head. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just found the paper." Maria sighed, her expression softening. "It's never just a find, Jack. It's a calling. And now that you've found it, you're part of something bigger than yourself." Jack felt a chill crawl up his spine. He didn't understand how she knew his name, how she knew anything about him, but he couldn't deny the feeling of destiny in the air. It was as if everything had led him to this moment. "What is this all about, Maria?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Maria took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for something heavy. "It's about the past, Jack. The past of my people, the Apache. The symbols you found, they're not just markings. They're part of a story. A story that needs to be told. And you, Jack Matthews, are part of that story now." Jack felt his pulse quicken. This was more than he had bargained for, more than he could have imagined when he first picked up that piece of paper. "How do you know all of this?" he asked, leaning forward. Maria's eyes flickered, and for a moment, Jack thought he saw a flash of something painful in her gaze. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "Because I'm the one who wrote it," she said quietly. Jack froze, his mind racing. "You wrote it?" he echoed, his voice thick with disbelief. Maria nodded, her face unreadable. "Yes. The paper you found is part of something much larger. Something that's been passed down for generations, but lost in time. I was the last to hold it. And now it's your turn." Jack's head spun. "But why me? Why now?" Maria's lips curled into a sad smile. "Because your past, your fate, has been intertwined with mine for longer than you know. You've been chosen to help me finish what was started. And the truth, Jack, is not something you can run from anymore." The weight of her words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and foreboding. Jack's mind raced as he tried to grasp what was happening. He had come here for a simple answer, but now he found himself at the center of something much more complicated. And the only way out was through the secrets Maria held, secrets that could change everything. "So what now?" Jack asked, his voice tight. Maria stood up, her movements graceful and deliberate. "Now we go back to where it all began." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what she meant, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. Maria led Jack through the town with an urgency that seemed to pull her every step forward. Her eyes, always scanning, never settling on one place too long, betrayed the tension in her movements. Jack followed, his heart racing, still trying to comprehend everything she had told him. Every step seemed to take him deeper into a world that was both foreign and yet somehow familiar. They walked in silence, the sound of their boots on the dirt road the only noise between them. Jack had a million questions, but none of them felt right to ask. Not yet. Not when he knew so little. The town gradually faded behind them as they reached the edge of the forest. The air here smelled different, cooler and more alive. The trees seemed to hold memories in their branches, secrets in the crevices of their bark. "This is where it began," Maria said quietly, stopping in front of an old oak tree. The roots of the tree twisted out of the earth, knotted and strong. It was as if the tree had been there longer than time itself. Maria turned to Jack, her expression soft but serious. "The symbols you found, they were meant to be a map. A map to a place that's been hidden for a long time." Jack looked at the tree, his mind trying to piece together the puzzle. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice low. Maria's lips curled into a faint smile. "It's where the past sleeps, Jack. Where everything was buried. The place where my ancestors hid their secrets, their treasures, and their stories. It's where the Apache were forced to leave behind what they couldn't carry." Jack stepped closer to the tree, his hand reaching out instinctively. As his fingers brushed against the bark, he felt something, a vibration, almost as if the tree was alive, responding to his touch. Maria watched him closely. "It reacts to those who are meant to find it," she said softly. "The tree recognizes you. You have a connection to it, Jack. A connection to my people." Jack took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling in. "I don't understand. Why me?" Maria's eyes softened, and for the first time since they met, Jack saw a hint of vulnerability. "Because you were chosen," she replied. "The past has a way of calling to those who are ready to hear it. The symbols, the paper, they were all a test. And now that you've passed it, you're part of something much bigger than you think." Jack felt a sense of dread and curiosity collide in his chest. He had no idea what he was walking into, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't turn back now. Maria took a step back, her hand brushing the ground near the tree's roots. "The key to the next step is buried here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dig." Jack knelt, his hands moving instinctively, pushing away the dirt and leaves until his fingers grazed something hard. He pulled at it, revealing a small, weathered box, its edges worn and faded from years of being hidden. Maria stood behind him, watching as he opened it. Inside, there was a small bundle of cloth. He carefully unwrapped it, revealing an intricate necklace made of beads and feathers. It was beautiful, yet haunting in its simplicity. "This is it," Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is the final piece of the puzzle. It will lead you to the answers you seek. But be warned, Jack. The truth you're about to uncover will change everything." Jack's heart raced as he held the necklace in his hands, the weight of its significance pressing down on him. He looked up at Maria, his mind spinning with questions. But Maria's gaze had already turned to the horizon, as if she were seeing something Jack couldn't. "We must go," she said quietly. "The path ahead is dangerous, and we don't have much time." Jack stood, the necklace still clutched in his hand. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew that his life, as he knew it, was over. He was no longer just a cowboy, he was now part of a much larger story. And the only way forward was to follow Maria into the unknown. Jack followed Maria deeper into the forest, the cool, damp air thick with the scent of pine and earth. The necklace he held in his hand felt heavier with each step, as if the weight of the secrets it contained was pressing down on him. Maria walked ahead, her pace steady and purposeful, leading him toward an unknown destination. Jack couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and dread. He had always preferred the quiet of his ranch, the routine of his days, but now, nothing seemed certain. Maria had told him the truth would change everything, and Jack could feel the truth creeping closer with each step. The forest grew denser as they moved further from the town, the trees towering over them, their thick branches blocking out most of the sunlight. Jack's eyes scanned the surroundings, but everything felt foreign, as if the forest was alive and watching him. He wanted to ask Maria more questions, to understand what he had stumbled into, but something in her silence told him that now wasn't the time. They walked for what felt like hours, the only sound the crunch of their boots on the forest floor and the distant call of birds. Finally, Maria stopped in front of a large boulder, its surface worn smooth by time. She turned to Jack, her face serious, her eyes distant. "We're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's heart raced. He looked around, but there was nothing remarkable about the place. Just trees, rocks, and the endless stretch of wilderness. "Here?" he asked, confusion creeping into his voice. Maria nodded. "The answers you seek are buried here," she said, her eyes narrowing as if searching for something only she could see. She crouched down beside the rock, her fingers brushing against the earth as if she were feeling for something hidden beneath the surface. Jack watched her, waiting for some sign, some clue that this was more than just another random stop. After a moment, Maria's hand paused, and she looked up at Jack, her expression unreadable. "It's time," she said, her voice low but firm. Jack's pulse quickened as he knelt beside her. He had no idea what he was about to uncover, but the sense of destiny in the air was undeniable. Maria gestured for him to help, and together they began to dig, their hands working in sync as they removed the dirt from the ground. It didn't take long before they uncovered a small, weathered box, its edges chipped and worn. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he reached for it, the box feeling colder than the air around them. With a deep breath, he opened it, revealing a stack of old, yellowed papers. Maria's eyes flickered with recognition as she gazed at the contents. "This is it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack glanced at her, unsure of what she meant. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. Maria took a deep breath, her hand resting on the papers. "These are the stories," she said softly. "The stories of my people, of the Apache, hidden for years. It's all here." Jack stared at the papers, the weight of their significance settling in. They were more than just words, they were the key to understanding everything. Jack felt a chill run down his spine as Maria's hand trembled slightly over the papers. "We're not alone here," she said suddenly, her voice sharp with urgency. Jack looked around, his heart pounding, but the forest seemed still, silent. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tight. Maria stood quickly, her eyes scanning the trees. "There are those who would stop us from uncovering this," she said, her voice low and steady. "They've been waiting for the right moment." and I fear that moment is now. Jack's mind raced. He had no idea who or what she was referring to, but the weight of her words felt heavy. He looked at the papers again, and then back at Maria. What now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria didn't answer immediately. She only looked at him, her gaze intense. Now we take what we've uncovered and we finish what was started, she said, her voice determined. And we do it before they find us. Jack didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing: he was no longer just a cowboy. He was part of something much larger than he could have ever imagined. And the truth, no matter how dark, would be the key to everything. Jack felt the air shift as Maria's words echoed in his mind. They weren't alone. He couldn't see anyone, but there was an undeniable tension in the atmosphere. The forest, once serene, now felt like a place full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. The leaves rustled as if the trees themselves were whispering warnings. Jack looked at Maria, her gaze fixed on the shadows between the trees. Her expression was unreadable, but the tension in her body was palpable. We have to move, she said, her voice steady but urgent. Now. Jack didn't question her. He could sense the urgency in her voice, the fear that had crept into her demeanor. He tucked the box of papers under his arm and stood up, scanning their surroundings. The forest felt too quiet, too still. Where are we going? He asked. Maria didn't answer immediately. She just started walking, her movements swift and purposeful. Jack followed her, his heart pounding in his chest. They moved deeper into the woods, the trees growing thicker, the shadows darker. Every step felt heavier than the last. As they walked, Jack's thoughts raced. What had Maria meant when she said they weren't alone? Who else was out here? He glanced around, half expecting to see figures lurking in the trees, but there was nothing. Just the sound of their footsteps on the forest floor, and the occasional bird call in the distance. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to thicken, as though the forest itself was closing in on them. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old, weathered cabin, its wooden walls covered in ivy and moss. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt strangely familiar. Maria stopped at the edge of the clearing and turned to Jack. This is where it all began, she said quietly. Jack looked at the cabin, his heart racing. What is this place? He asked. Maria's eyes softened, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. It's where my family hid the truth, she said, her voice tinged with sadness. Where the past was buried, but never forgotten. Jack looked at her, his mind trying to piece together what she was saying. What truth? He asked. Maria hesitated, as if she were choosing her words carefully. The truth about the Apache, about my people. The stories you've uncovered, they're not just stories. They're our history. Our legacy. And it's time for it to be known. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. This was more than just a mystery. It was something much bigger, something that would change everything. He had no idea how he had gotten wrapped up in it, but there was no turning back now. Maria stepped forward, her hand brushing the door of the cabin. It creaked open with a sound that sent a shiver through Jack's body. Come inside, she said, her voice low and almost reverent. Jack followed her inside, the door closing quietly behind them. The cabin was small, but inside, it felt like a world unto itself. There were bookshelves lining the walls, filled with old, leather-bound books and faded maps. On the far wall was a large wooden chest, its surface covered in dust, but it had a certain significance. Maria walked over to the chest and knelt down, her fingers brushing the lock. This is where everything ends, she said softly. Jack watched as she slowly opened the chest, revealing a collection of items, old scrolls, ancient tools, and a small leather pouch. These are the final pieces, Maria said, her eyes focused on the items in front of her. She picked up the pouch and handed it to Jack. This is the key to everything, she said. Jack took the pouch, feeling its weight in his hands. He untied the string and opened it, revealing a small, intricately carved stone. It was smooth, dark, and seemed to glow with an otherworldly energy. "What is this?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria looked at him, her expression intense. "This is the heart of the Apache. The final link in the chain. And now, Jack, you're the one who must carry it forward." Jack felt the weight of her words settle on him. The stone in his hand felt heavier than it looked, as if it were filled with centuries of history and power. He looked at Maria, unsure of what to say. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he admitted. Maria smiled, a faint, bittersweet smile. "None of us are ready. But we do what we must." Jack nodded slowly, his fingers tightening around the stone. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew one thing: the journey had only just begun. Jack held the stone in his hand, its surface cool and smooth against his palm, yet it felt as if it pulsed with a hidden power. The weight of the moment settled over him as he looked at Maria, whose gaze never left the stone. "This is it, isn't it?" Jack asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Maria nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and determination. "This is what you've been chosen to protect, Jack," she said quietly. "The heart of our people. It has been hidden for centuries, passed down through generations, and now it is your responsibility to ensure its safety." Jack's mind raced as he processed her words. He had never asked for any of this, never imagined that his quiet life as a cowboy would be thrust into something as monumental as this. Yet here he was, holding a piece of history that was far bigger than anything he could have understood. "But what do I do with it?" Jack asked, his voice cracking slightly. "What's next?" Maria turned away from him and walked to the far side of the cabin, her movements deliberate. She stopped before an old wooden map hanging on the wall, its edges tattered and worn with age. Jack followed her, still clutching the stone in his hand. "The path ahead is unclear, but it is the only path you can take," Maria replied, her voice steady. She pointed to a marked location on the map, a small symbol drawn in the shape of a mountain. "This is where it all began, where the final piece of the story lies. We must go there, Jack. We must finish what was started all those years ago." Jack looked at the map, feeling a mixture of fear and anticipation. The mountain was far, deep in the heart of the wilderness. The journey would be long, and Jack had no idea what dangers they might face along the way. But as he glanced down at the stone in his hand, he knew there was no turning back. "And what about you?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Maria turned to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "I have my own path to walk," she said softly. "But you will not be alone, Jack. There are others who will help you. Others who have been waiting for the right moment to act. The Apache are not as lost as they seem." Jack felt a chill run through him as he absorbed her words. He had heard stories of the Apache, of their power and resilience, but he had never imagined he would be involved in something so deeply tied to their history. "You mean there are more people like you?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Maria smiled faintly, but the sadness never left her eyes. "There are always others," she said, her voice quiet. "Those who know the truth, those who remember. They have watched, waited. Now the time has come to reclaim what was lost." Jack's hand tightened around the stone. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This was bigger than any ranch or any cowboy life. This was about something that had been hidden for generations, something that could change everything. Maria picked up a small satchel from the table and handed it to Jack. "Pack what you need," she said, her tone brisk now. "We leave at dawn." Jack nodded, taking the bag from her. His mind was still racing, but he knew one thing for sure: this journey would be the beginning of something that would change the course of his life. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore. He was now part of a larger story, one that was centuries in the making. As he packed his things, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that everything was leading to something inevitable, something he couldn't escape. And in that moment, he realized that the stone in his hand was not just a symbol of the past, it was the key to the future. A future he was now bound to, whether he liked it or not. As dawn broke, the pale light of the morning sun filtered through the dense trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Jack Matthews stood at the edge of the clearing, his hand resting on the small leather pouch containing the stone. He had packed his few belongings, secured the supplies Maria had given him, and was ready for the journey ahead. But still, the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on his chest. He turned to look at Maria, who stood silently beside him, her face set with determination. Her dark eyes seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories, and Jack couldn't help but feel like he was walking into a past that didn't belong to him. "Are you ready?" Maria asked, her voice steady but soft. Jack nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his mind. "I don't know what I'm walking into, Maria. But I know I can't turn back now." She gave him a brief, almost imperceptible smile. "There's no turning back, Jack. Not anymore." They began walking, the forest path narrow and winding, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, Jack's mind wandered back to the day before, to the cabin where Maria had revealed the true nature of their mission. The stone in his pocket was more than just a symbol. It was the key to a hidden legacy, a legacy of the Apache people that had been buried for generations. Jack had no idea what he was meant to do with it, but Maria had made it clear that the truth was waiting for him, waiting to be uncovered. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the crunch of their boots on the forest floor and the distant calls of birds in the trees. The further they went, the more Jack felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The path ahead was treacherous, and though he had never been afraid of the wild, this journey felt different. There was something about it that felt larger than life, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Finally, Maria stopped, her eyes scanning the area ahead. Jack followed her gaze, but all he saw were trees and the dense underbrush that surrounded them. "We're close," she said quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jack's heart quickened. "Close to what?" he asked, his voice thick with anticipation. Maria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, parting the underbrush with a steady hand. Jack followed her, his steps slow but sure. And then, through the thick trees, he saw it. The ruins of an ancient stone structure, half covered by vines and moss. It was small, but its stone walls were still strong, standing as if waiting for someone to uncover them. Jack felt his breath catch in his throat. This was it. This was the place that Maria had spoken of, the place where the past had been buried, hidden away from the world. "What is this place?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria stepped forward, her fingers tracing the stone walls. "This is where it all began, Jack. This is the place where the Apache kept their secrets safe. It's where the heart of our people was hidden." Jack felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He had come here looking for answers, but now that he had found this place, he realized that the answers would not be easy to uncover. "How do we get inside?" Jack asked, looking around for an entrance. Maria smiled faintly. "You've already found the way," she said. She reached into the pocket of her cloak and pulled out the small stone Jack had been carrying. Holding it up to the wall, she pressed it against the hidden indentation in the stone. There was a low rumble, and with a slow grinding sound, the wall shifted, revealing a darkened doorway. Jack's heart raced as he stepped forward. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The truth was just beyond that door, waiting to be revealed. But as he stepped into the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, something ancient and powerful, waiting for him to take the next step. Jack looked back at Maria, who gave him a quiet nod. "Let's go," she said. And together they entered the darkened chamber, leaving the world of the living behind as they stepped into the heart of the Apache past. As Jack stepped into the darkness of the stone chamber, a chill washed over him, the air heavy with the weight of time. The walls around him were rough and uneven, their surfaces etched with symbols he couldn't yet understand. The only sound was the soft echo of their footsteps, each one feeling like it was reverberating through centuries of silence. The stone door slid shut behind them with a quiet thud, sealing them inside. Maria moved ahead, her movements fluid and confident as she led the way. Jack followed closely, his heart pounding in his chest, every step taking him deeper into a past he could hardly fathom. They reached the center of the chamber, where a raised platform stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by faded murals on the walls. The murals depicted scenes of Apache life, warriors, rituals, and symbols that seemed to swirl with an energy all their own. Maria stopped in front of the platform and turned to Jack, her eyes reflecting the dim light. "This is where everything started, Jack," she said softly. "This is where the heart of our people was hidden. The truth of our history, our legacy." Jack looked around the room, his gaze lingering on the murals. He could feel the power of the place, the history that it held, but he still didn't understand what it all meant. "What am I supposed to do with this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, intricately carved piece of wood. She held it up to the wall, pressing it against a hidden indentation. There was a soft click, and a section of the wall slowly shifted, revealing a small alcove. Inside, resting on a bed of soft cloth, was a relic unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was a small, ornate box, its surface covered in intricate carvings. The moment Jack laid eyes on it, he felt a surge of recognition, as if it had been calling to him. Maria stepped forward, her fingers brushing over the box as she gently lifted it. "This is the final piece," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is what we've been protecting, Jack. The knowledge of our people, the key to everything." Jack reached out, his hand trembling as he took the box from her. It felt warm in his hands, as if the stories it contained were alive, waiting to be told. As he opened the box, a wave of energy washed over him, filling him with a sense of purpose he had never known. Inside the box were several scrolls, each one wrapped in a faded piece of cloth. The scrolls were covered in the same symbols he had seen on the walls of the chamber. Jack carefully unrolled one of the scrolls, his heart racing as he began to read the ancient text. The words were difficult to decipher, but he could make out enough to understand the significance. This was the story of the Apache, their struggle, their triumphs, and their sacrifices. It was a history that had been hidden for centuries, preserved in these scrolls, waiting for someone to uncover it. Maria watched him silently, her face a mixture of relief and sorrow. "The truth is here, Jack," she said softly. "And now it's yours to protect." Jack nodded, his mind still racing as he processed everything. He had been thrust into a world he didn't understand, but now, with the scrolls in his hands, he felt a deep connection to the Apache people, to their past, and to their future. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Jack knew one thing: he had a purpose now. He was no longer just a cowboy. He was the keeper of a legacy, the protector of a history that had been forgotten. And as he looked at Maria, he knew that their paths were intertwined. Together they would carry the truth of the Apache people into the world, no matter the cost.